Welcome to the Cozy Storytime, your peaceful space to unwind and relax. Before we start, make sure to subscribe and like the video for more cozy stories every night. So, where are you watching it from? And what are you doing right now? I hope you enjoyed this story. Tonight, let your mind drift through the corridors of Hogwarts, where secrets lie hidden behind ancient stone walls, waiting to be uncovered. Close your eyes. Feel the flickering glow of candlelight, the soft whisper of enchanted tapestries, and the distant echoes of footsteps on worn castle floors. The air hums with the energy of untold stories, and in the heart of it all, a golden key holds the power to unlock something far beyond imagination. This is a tale of discovery, of courage, of the unknown. A journey through shadows and hidden doors, where time itself bends, and the past lingers like a quiet whisper in the dark. Breathe deeply. Let go of the day's worries. And step with us into the mystery of the golden key. The castle was eerily silent at this hour, the only sound being the faint crackling of the dying embers in the Gryffindor common room fireplace. The usual lively atmosphere had given way to the comforting quiet of a late night, with only a few candles flickering near the walls. Most of the students had long since retreated to their dormitories, but I remained, curled up in an armchair with a book I had barely been reading. My mind had wandered, and my eyelids had started to droop when something caught my attention, a glimmering light from the far end of the room. At first, I thought it was a reflection from the firelight bouncing off some forgotten trinket, but as I stood and moved closer, the golden shimmer became more distinct. My heart thumped as I reached the edge of the long study table near the bookshelf. There, amidst a scattering of old parchment and quills, lay a small golden key. It looked ancient, the handle adorned with swirling, intricate engravings. It didn't look like any ordinary key I had seen before, not even the heavy, rusted ones Filch carried on his belt. Curious, I hesitated before picking it up. The moment my fingers wrapped around it, a warm pulse shot through my hand. I gasped, nearly dropping it back onto the table. It was as if the key was alive, thrumming with magic I couldn't quite understand. The sensation wasn't painful, but it left a strange, tingling feeling up my arm, as if I had just grabbed hold of a low electrical current. I looked around the room, half expecting someone to appear and claim it, but there was no one. The key had simply been sitting there, waiting. But waiting for what? Or for whom? A sudden chill ran down my spine. Hogwarts was a place of secrets, hidden chambers, vanishing staircases, enchanted objects that could do things far beyond comprehension. This key, I realized, was no different. I swallowed hard and clenched the key in my palm. There was something about it, something compelling. It was almost as if it wanted me to take it. But who had left it here? And why? My thoughts were racing when the fire behind me crackled loudly, making me jump. I spun around, half expecting to see a shadow lurking in the darkness, but the common room remained empty. I debated waking Harry. He was the one person I knew who wouldn't dismiss something like this as a coincidence. He had dealt with too many strange occurrences at Hogwarts to ignore something magical when it appeared. But it was late, and I had no idea if this was even something dangerous. What if it was just a misplaced key, despite its unusual aura? What if it belonged to a professor? Or worse, what if someone had intentionally left it out for me to find? I exhaled slowly, trying to steady my nerves. I decided I wouldn't do anything reckless just yet. I would keep the key, at least until I figured out more about it. Sliding it into my robe pocket, I made my way toward the dormitory stairs, my mind still buzzing with thoughts. But as soon as I reached the first step, I felt something odd. The weight in my pocket was gone. I froze, my heart pounding. My fingers scrambled inside my robes, searching desperately, but the key had disappeared. Panic surged through me. Had it fallen out? But no, I would have heard it hit the floor. Frantically, I turned back toward the table, and to my utter disbelief, the golden key was right where I had first found it, glinting under the dim light of the torches. I swallowed hard. That wasn't normal. I had definitely taken it, felt it in my hand, and yet here it was, as if it had never left the table. My breath hitched as a terrifying possibility crossed my mind. Maybe the key didn't want to be taken. Determined not to let my nerves get the better of me, I reached for it again, but this time, as soon as my fingers touched its cool surface, I felt something different. A whisper, faint and distant, brushing against my mind like an echo through a tunnel. It wasn't words, not exactly, but a presence, something old, something watchful. My heart pounded in my chest as I snatched my hand away. I needed to get out of here. With a final wary glance at the key, I turned and hurried up the stairs, not stopping until I reached my dormitory. The familiar sight of the four-poster beds and the gentle snoring of my fellow Gryffindors should have been comforting, but my mind was still racing. I crawled into bed, pulling the covers up to my chin. Sleep did not come easily that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the key's golden surface shimmering in the dark, its engravings twisting as if they were alive. I could still feel the strange energy lingering in my fingertips. Whatever this key was, it was no ordinary object. And deep down, I knew I was meant to find it. What I didn't know yet was why. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the Gryffindor dormitory, casting long golden rays across my bed. Despite the warmth of the sun, I felt groggy, my mind still clouded with the strange events of the night before. The golden key had refused to be taken, appearing back on the table as if it had never moved. And that whisper, faint, distant, but unmistakably real, still echoed in my thoughts. I had barely slept, twisting and turning, trying to make sense of it. I knew I couldn't keep this to myself. With a sigh, I pushed aside my blankets and hurried through my morning routine. The common room was already buzzing with activity by the time I came down. Groups of Gryffindors were chatting, some finishing their breakfast while others frantically scribbled down last-minute homework. The golden key was no longer on the table where I had found it last night. Had it vanished? Or had someone else taken it? My stomach twisted at the thought, but I had no time to dwell on it now. I spotted Harry Potter near the fireplace, engaged in a quiet conversation with Hermione Granger and Ron Weasley. If there was anyone who would take this seriously, it was Harry. He had dealt with countless magical mysteries at Hogwarts, enchanted objects, secret rooms, and even cursed artifacts. If anyone could help me figure out what the key was, it was him. I approached cautiously. "Harry," I said, keeping my voice low. He looked up, his green eyes sharp with curiosity. "What's up?" he asked, shifting slightly to make room for me in the circle. Hermione gave me a brief nod before returning her attention to the book in her lap, while Ron was too busy munching on a piece of toast to notice me. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to start. Then, taking a deep breath, I leaned in. "I found something last night," I whispered. "A golden key." It looked ancient, but when I tried to take it, something strange happened. Harry's brow furrowed. "Strange how?" I glanced around to make sure no one was eavesdropping before continuing. I picked it up, but it disappeared from my pocket and reappeared on the table where I first found it. And there was a whisper. I didn't hear words exactly, but I felt something. It wasn't just an object, Harry. It was almost like it was alive. For a moment, there was silence. Hermione had stopped reading, her interest now fully focused on me. Ron, swallowing his last bite of toast, finally paid attention. "You're sure it wasn't just some trick of the light?" he asked. I shook my head. I know what I felt. It wasn't normal. Harry exchanged a glance with Hermione, and I could see the gears turning in his mind. "Where did you find it?" he asked. "In the common room, on the long table near the bookshelf." "Was anyone else there when you found it?" "No, I was alone." Hermione pursed her lips. It doesn't make sense for a magical object to behave like that without a specific reason. If it really has some kind of intelligence or enchantment, it means someone either created it for a purpose or left it there for someone to find. She folded her arms, thinking hard. "But why you?" "I hadn't considered that." "Why me?" Hogwarts was full of talented witches and wizards, many more capable than I was. If the key had been meant for someone, surely it would have found its way into the hands of a professor or one of the older students. Unless, maybe it wasn't meant for me, I admitted. Maybe I just happened to be the one who found it. Harry didn't seem convinced. "I don't believe in coincidences at Hogwarts," he said. "If something this strange happened, there's got to be a reason." He glanced at Hermione again. "Have you read anything about magical keys?" Hermione nodded. "There are enchanted keys, of course. Poor keys, for one, they transport people to different locations. But those are usually charmed with a specific spell, and they don't behave the way you described. There are also ancient keys that serve as locks to magical secrets, but they don't typically move on their own. If this key vanished from your pocket and reappeared, then it's something different entirely." Ron raised an eyebrow. "Are we talking about some kind of cursed object?" "I don't think it's cursed," I said quickly. "It didn't hurt me, but it definitely reacted when I touched it." Harry tapped his fingers on the armrest of his chair. "There's only one way to know for sure," he said. "We need to find it again." A part of me had been hoping he wouldn't say that. The idea of touching the key again sent a shiver down my spine. But I knew Harry was right. If we left it alone, we might never find out what it truly was, or worse, someone else might find it and take it for their own reasons. We agreed to meet later that evening when the common room was quieter. Until then, there was nothing to do but wait, though the hours dragged on painfully slow. Classes blurred together, and even lunch tasted bland as my mind remained fixated on the golden key. That night, as the common room emptied and students retreated to their dormitories, I found myself sitting at the same table where I had first discovered the key. Harry sat across from me, his wand at the ready, while Ron and Hermione kept watch near the entrance in case anyone, especially Filch or Professor McGonagall, wandered by. I took a deep breath and reached out, half expecting the key to reappear on its own. but the table remained empty. I frowned. It was right here. Harry's eyes darted around the room. Are you sure it hasn't moved somewhere else? I stood, scanning the area. There was no sign of the golden glimmer I had seen the night before. I was about to turn back when something caught my eye, just beneath one of the armchairs near the fire. A faint golden glow peeked from the shadows. There, I whispered, pointing. Harry moved first, stepping carefully toward the chair. He knelt, reaching out slowly. But just as his fingers brushed against the key, something happened. A rush of wind swept through the room, though the windows were tightly shut. The fire in the hearth flickered wildly, casting strange, stretching shadows against the stone walls. The temperature dropped, and I felt the hair on my arms rise. The key trembled, glowing slightly brighter. Harry yanked his hand back, eyes wide. It's reacting again. I swallowed hard. What do we do? Hermione stepped closer, her wand raised. If this key is enchanted, there's a spell on it we don't understand. Ron shifted uneasily. Maybe we shouldn't be messing with this. Harry, however, was determined. He reached out again, this time gripping the key firmly. The moment he did, the glow intensified, and the whisper I had heard last night returned. Only this time, it wasn't just a whisper. It was clearer, more defined, as if something, or someone, was speaking directly into our minds. Find the door, it murmured. And just like that, the room plunged into complete silence once more. The whisper faded, leaving behind an eerie silence. The four of us stood frozen, our breaths shallow, as if any movement would disturb whatever presence had just spoken to us. Harry still held the key in his hand, its golden surface warm and pulsing like a heartbeat. The glow had dimmed slightly, but we could all feel the magic radiating from it. Did everyone hear that? Ron's voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. His eyes darted between us, looking for reassurance that he hadn't imagined the whole thing. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. It said, "Find the door." Hermione's brows knitted together in deep thought, her fingers tightening around her wand. That means this key is more than just an artifact. It's meant to unlock something specific. She turned to Harry. Did you feel anything when you touched it? Harry studied the key in his palm before shaking his head. Not like before. Just warmth. But when it spoke, I felt it, inside my head. He glanced at me. Did it feel the same for you last night? I hesitated before nodding. Yes, but it wasn't this clear. It was more like an echo, like something distant. This time, it felt direct. Ron shuffled uncomfortably. So, we're dealing with some kind of talking key? That's bloody fantastic, he muttered. Next thing we know, it'll start giving us riddles like the Sphinx in the Triwizard Tournament. Despite the tension, I nearly smiled at that. But my mind was too preoccupied with a bigger question. Where was the door the key wanted us to find? Hermione exhaled sharply. All right. If the key is enchanted to lead us somewhere, we need to think logically. Doors at Hogwarts aren't just doors. Some lead to hidden chambers, others change locations, and some can only be accessed by specific means. She began pacing. We have to consider possibilities. What kind of door would require a key this special? Harry's eyes darkened slightly. It could be something like the Chamber of Secrets, he suggested. A place that's been hidden for centuries, waiting to be opened. Ron paled. Brilliant, Harry. Let's just hope there's not a basilisk behind this one. I don't think it's the chamber, I said quickly. This key doesn't feel dark. If anything, it feels ancient, like it's meant to protect something instead of keeping something locked away. Harry nodded thoughtfully. So, we start searching the castle. That was easier said than done. Hogwarts was a maze of shifting staircases, hidden passages, and rooms that sometimes appeared only when you needed them most. Finding a single door that matched this key could take weeks, months even. But something told me we didn't have that long. We need a starting point, Hermione said, tapping her chin. There must be some reference to a golden key in the school's history. Maybe the restricted section in the library? Or, Harry said, standing up, we let the key guide us. Ron blinked. What does that even mean? Harry held up the key. It already led us this far. It returned to the table last night when it didn't want to be taken. And now it's telling us to find the door. What if we just follow it? There was a beat of silence. That's actually a really good idea, Hermione admitted. We all stood, watching as Harry carefully set the key on the table. The moment he released it, the golden glow flickered faintly. Then, slowly, it began to move, not in a spinning or rolling motion, but sliding across the wooden surface, as if drawn by an invisible force. My breath hitched. It's pointing. The key stopped, its handle aligned with the entrance of the common room. Ron gulped. Well, that's not ominous at all. With cautious glances around the room, we gathered our courage and stepped through the portrait hole. The castle was quieter now, with most students either asleep or finishing up late night studying in their common rooms. The torches along the corridors flickered dimly, casting long, stretching shadows along the stone walls. Harry held the key in his palm again, and sure enough, it vibrated lightly, almost like a compass. He walked forward, and we followed. The key pulsed faintly, its glow intensifying whenever we turned in the right direction. Down the stairs, past the great hall, through a series of twisting corridors, I quickly lost track of where we were going. Hogwarts' endless hallways could be disorienting at night, and the more we walked, the more I realized we were heading somewhere few students ever ventured. We're going underground, Hermione muttered. She was right. The air had grown cooler, the walls damp with the faint scent of moss and old stone. The key led us deeper, past familiar areas like the dungeons, past the potions classroom, until we reached a part of the castle I had never seen before. The corridor ahead was narrow and lined with old, rusted sconces that no longer held torches. It looked abandoned. Ron stopped abruptly. Hold on. I know Hogwarts is full of weird places, but this doesn't feel right. Shouldn't we, I don't know, tell a professor before we go further? Hermione gave him a look. And say what? Oh, excuse me, Professor McGonagall, but we found a magical key that's leading us somewhere and we'd like your permission to follow it into an unknown part of the castle? That would go over well. Ron scowled. Okay, fair point. Harry stepped forward. We're close. I can feel it. And then we saw it. At the very end of the corridor, partially hidden in the shadows, was an old wooden door. It was massive, larger than any normal door in Hogwarts, with strange carvings etched into the frame. Vines of ancient script curled along the edges, pulsing faintly with a dim golden light, almost as if they recognized the key's presence. We all exchanged nervous glances. "This has to be it," I whispered. Harry stepped forward, the key in his grasp. He reached out, but before he could insert it into the lock, something made us all freeze. A sound. Footsteps. Coming from behind us. I turned sharply, my heart hammering. Someone else was here. Harry clenched the key tighter. Someone followed us. Hermione pulled out her wand. "We need to go. Now." But before we could even decide whether to open the door or run, a voice rang through the darkness, a voice that sent a chill straight down my spine. Well, out of bed past curfew, are we?" A figure emerged from the shadows, her pink cardigan barely visible in the dim light. Her wide, frog-like eyes gleamed with smug satisfaction, and her lips curled into a sickeningly sweet smile. Dolores Umbridge. I felt my stomach drop. We were caught. My heart nearly stopped as Dolores Umbridge stepped forward, her squat figure barely illuminated by the dim torchlight. The pink cardigan she always wore looked strangely out of place in the dark, damp corridor, but her presence alone sent a shiver of unease down my spine. Harry instinctively took a step in front of us, subtly shifting his grip on the golden key as if to hide it. But I knew Umbridge had already seen it. Her beady eyes flickered toward his hand before she folded her arms with that familiar, condescending smile. Well, she said, her voice dripping with forced sweetness. "What do we have here?" "For students sneaking around the castle at night, lurking in places where they most certainly shouldn't be." She'd sked, shaking her head dramatically. "I do hope you have a good explanation." No one spoke. My mind raced for an excuse, any excuse, but nothing came to me. Hermione, who was usually the quickest at thinking on her feet, stayed quiet as well, though I could see the gears turning in her mind. Ron looked like he'd rather disappear into the floor. Harry was the only one who didn't look away. He straightened his shoulders and met Umbridge's gaze with quiet defiance. "We were just exploring," he said evenly. "Nothing against the rules about walking the corridors, is there?" Umbridge's eyes narrowed slightly. "Oh, but there is, Mr. Potter," she said, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Curfew has been in effect for quite some time now. Students wandering about after hours, especially in areas of the castle that they have no business being in, is a serious matter." She took a slow step forward, tilting her head. "And what exactly, I wonder, could be so interesting down here?" I felt my stomach twist. She was too clever to believe that we were simply exploring. She had caught us standing in front of a hidden door, a door we clearly weren't supposed to find. Worse still, Harry still had the key in his grip. If she demanded to see it, there was no telling what she would do. Hermione cleared her throat suddenly, stepping forward. "We got lost," she said, her tone polite but firm. "We were coming back from the library, and we took a wrong turn. The castle changes so much at night that we didn't even realize where we were." I held my breath, hoping she'd believe it. Umbridge let out a short, false laugh. "Lost? My dear, sweet girl, I'm afraid I find that highly unlikely." She clasped her hands together. You see, I happen to know that Gryffindor Tower is in the complete opposite direction of where we are now. Hermione opened her mouth, but Umbridge raised a hand to silence her. I also know, she continued, her smile tightening, that when students lie, it usually means they're up to something. Her gaze flickered between us, sharp and assessing. So, I'll ask again. What are you doing here? No one answered. For a moment, the corridor was filled with nothing but the distant sound of dripping water from the ceiling. Then Umbridge's eyes landed on Harry's hand again. She stepped forward, her chubby fingers twitching. What's that you're holding, Mr. Potter? I felt my pulse quicken. Harry didn't move. Oh, come now, she coaxed, her voice deceptively light. No need to hide things from your dear professor. Hand it over. I wanted to grab the key from him and run. I wanted to cast a spell to distract her, to do anything to keep it from falling into her hands. But we were trapped. If we refused, she'd have an excuse to punish us. If we gave it to her, we might never get it back. Harry clenched his jaw. Then, slowly, he held out the key. Umbridge reached for it eagerly, her stubby fingers closing around the golden metal. And she recoiled with a sharp gasp. The moment she touched the key, the golden glow intensified, and a searing light burst from its surface. The air crackled with energy, and a powerful force seemed to repel her, as though the key itself refused to be taken by her hands. She stumbled back, eyes wide with shock. What? Harry yanked the key away, and the glow dimmed once more, pulsing gently in his palm. For a split second, no one moved. Then, Umbridge's expression darkened. What is that? She demanded, her voice no longer sweet but sharp with suspicion. Harry pocketed the key quickly. I don't know, he lied smoothly. It's just something I found. Her lips pressed into a thin line. That, she said, her voice trembling slightly with anger, is no ordinary trinket. She straightened her pink cardigan, composing herself. I will be speaking to the headmaster about this. I stiffened. The last thing we needed was Dumbledore getting involved, because if he knew, he might take the key away for our own safety. But if Umbridge got her hands on it first, it could be far worse. She gave us a calculating look. I trust you'll all report to my office first thing tomorrow evening for detention. Ron groaned under his breath. Hermione swallowed hard. Professor, No arguments, she said curtly, smoothing down the front of her cardigan. Consider yourselves lucky I'm not giving you worse. She took a slow step backward, watching us carefully. Then, with a final, lingering glance at Harry's pocket, she turned on her heel and disappeared into the darkness. We stayed frozen until the sound of her footsteps faded completely. The moment we were sure she was gone, Ron exhaled loudly. Well, that could have gone worse. Hermione shot him a glare. She's going straight to Dumbledore. We need to figure out what to do before someone takes the key away. Harry pulled the key back out, staring at it with a frown. It rejected her, he murmured. I nodded. It knew she wasn't supposed to have it. That proves something, Hermione said urgently. This key isn't just important, it's intelligent. It can tell who should and shouldn't hold it. That means whatever is behind that door is something big. Ron rubbed his temples. Right, so just to summarize, we have an ancient key that leads to a mystery door, We don't know what's inside, and now Umbridge is breathing down our necks about it." He sighed. "I'd say that puts this at about a 7 on the terrible idea scale." "We can't stop now," I said. Harry looked at the door again, determination settling into his expression. "We open it," he said firmly. "Tonight." Hermione hesitated. "Harry, if we do this now, there's no turning back." "There was never any turning back," he said. I felt my heartbeat quicken. No one spoke. Then, slowly, Harry stepped forward and raised the key to the lock. A deep click echoed through the corridor, and the door began to open. The moment the key clicked into place, a deep rumble vibrated through the stone floor beneath us. The old wooden door, towering and ancient, shuddered as unseen mechanisms unlocked, sending faint golden light spilling from the edges of the frame. My breath caught in my throat. Then, slowly, the door began to open. A gust of cool air rushed past us, carrying with it the scent of something old, dust, parchment, and a faint metallic tang that reminded me of magic itself. The glow from the carvings on the door pulsed in response, as if sensing our presence. Harry stepped forward first, gripping his wand tightly. I followed right behind him, with Hermione and Ron close behind. None of us spoke, too transfixed by what lay beyond. At first, I thought we were looking into nothingness. But as my eyes adjusted, I realized the space beyond the door was not another room in Hogwarts. It was vast, an endless corridor stretching into the dark, the walls lined with towering stone pillars carved with strange, twisting runes. The air here was different, thick with magic that pressed against my skin. I swallowed. "This isn't part of the castle, is it?" Hermione shook her head. "No," she whispered. "This is something else entirely." "Brilliant," Ron muttered, peering around warily. "We've just found a secret portal to Merlin knows where, and we're walking straight into it." Harry didn't hesitate. He took a steadying breath and stepped through the threshold. As soon as his foot touched the floor beyond, the golden key pulsed once more, then vanished from his hand in a shower of sparks. We all jumped. "Bloody hell!" Ron yelped. "It's gone!" I gasped, checking my pockets as if it might have somehow reappeared there. But it was truly gone, as if the key had only existed to open the door, and now that its purpose was served, it had disappeared. Hermione exhaled sharply. "We might not be able to get back out." Harry turned toward us, his expression unreadable. "Then we find another way." His determination was enough to push me forward. Whatever lay ahead, we had come too far to turn back. I stepped past the threshold, and immediately, the temperature around me dropped slightly. There was magic in the air, powerful and old, whispering along my skin. Hermione and Ron hesitated only for a moment longer before following. As soon as the last of us stepped through, the door creaked ominously, then slammed shut behind us. Ron let out a strangled noise. Yeah, definitely feeling great about this decision. Ignoring him, I turned my attention to our surroundings. The corridor stretched ahead endlessly, vanishing into the darkness. The walls were lined with massive pillars, each engraved with shifting symbols that glowed faintly when we passed. The runes felt almost alive, pulsing with the same golden energy as the key. "What is this place?" I murmured. Hermione ran her fingers lightly over one of the carvings. "I don't recognize this language," she admitted. It's ancient magic, far older than anything I've seen at Hogwarts. Harry was quiet for a moment, then turned to us. We moved forward. If there's something hidden here, we have to find it. So we walked. With every step, the silence grew heavier. It wasn't the stillness of an abandoned place, it was the charged quiet of something waiting. I felt the weight of unseen eyes pressing on us, as if the very walls were watching. After what felt like an eternity, we reached a massive archway. Beyond it was an open chamber, circular and vast. The ceiling was lost in shadow, the floor marked with an intricate symbol that glowed faintly beneath a pedestal at the center. And on that pedestal sat an object. A small, golden chest. It was no larger than a jewelry box, yet something about it radiated immense power. The air around it shimmered, distorting slightly as if reality itself struggled to contain whatever was inside. I felt my pulse quicken. We found it, I whispered. Harry stepped forward cautiously, eyes locked on the chest. He raised his hand, but before he could take another step, the chamber reacted. A low hum filled the air, and the glowing symbols around us shifted, rearranging into new patterns. The ground beneath our feet trembled, and then the shadows moved. From the darkness beyond the chamber, something began to take shape. Silhouettes stretched and twisted, rising like ink spilling into water, merging into a single towering figure. It had no face, no true form, only a shifting mass of darkness, pulsing with eerie energy. But when it spoke, its voice was deep and resonant, vibrating through my very bones. You are not its rightful bearers. The words sent a cold shiver down my spine. Harry gripped his wand. We don't mean any harm. The shadow loomed closer. And yet you come seeking what is not yours. Ron took a step back. Brilliant. Of course, there's a bloody guardian. Hermione's hand tightened around her wand. We should have expected this. Ancient magic always comes with protections. Harry didn't move. His green eyes were steady as he spoke. We don't want to steal anything. We just need to know what this is. The shadow was silent for a long moment. Then it shifted. One trial. I swallowed hard. Trial? The voice rumbled. To prove yourselves worthy. Before we could respond, the floor beneath us changed. The glowing patterns expanded outward, rearranging themselves. The air crackled with magic. Then, suddenly, the four of us were no longer together. The chamber vanished. I gasped as the world around me twisted, reshaping into something entirely new. When I blinked, I was no longer in the chamber. I was alone, standing in what looked like a vast, endless sky. Stars stretched in every direction, and beneath my feet was nothing but an invisible surface holding me aloft. Panic surged through me. Harry? Hermione? Ron? No response. I spun around, but there was nothing. No walls, no door. Only me and the endless expanse of sky. Then, a voice. Not the shadow's voice, but something softer, older. What do you seek? I turned sharply, searching for the source. Who's there? The voice echoed again. What do you seek? I hesitated. My mind raced for an answer. Knowledge? Power? A way home? Then, before I could respond, something appeared before me, a mirror, tall and ornate, its golden frame twisting like vines. And in its reflection, I saw myself, but not as I was. I saw a version of me that looked stronger, wiser, someone who had already learned the secrets I sought. Someone who had already faced the mysteries beyond the door and understood them. My heart pounded. I took a shaky breath and reached toward the mirror. The moment my fingers brushed the glass, the world shattered. Everything collapsed into golden light, and suddenly, I was back. The chamber returned in a rush. The others were there too, looking just as shaken. Ron clutched his chest. What the hell just happened? Hermione was breathing heavily. A test, she whispered. We each had to face something. Harry turned toward the pedestal. The shadowy figure was gone, and the golden chest was now unlocked. The silence in the chamber was thick, pressing in around us as we stood staring at the now unlocked golden chest. The strange shadow guardian had vanished, leaving behind nothing but a lingering sense of something ancient watching us. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, my pulse still racing from whatever that test had been. Harry was the first to step forward. His hand hovered over the lid of the chest for a long moment before he glanced back at us. This is it, he murmured. Whatever's inside, it's why the key led us here. Ron let out a shaky breath. I just hope it's not cursed. Not helping, Hermione muttered, though she looked just as nervous as the rest of us. I swallowed hard. Whatever was in that chest wasn't ordinary magic. The key had vanished, the guardian had tested us, and the entire place felt like it had been waiting for us. But waiting for what? Harry's fingers brushed against the lid. A soft hum vibrated through the air, and the golden engravings on the chest glowed brighter for a brief moment. Then, with a quiet click, the lid eased open. All of us instinctively took a step closer, peering inside. At first, I thought it was empty. The inside was lined with deep blue velvet, but there was no pile of treasure, no powerful-looking artifact resting within. Instead, sitting in the very center of the chest was a single, seemingly ordinary piece of parchment. I blinked. Ron let out a short, incredulous laugh. You've got to be joking. We go through all that, and it's just a bit of paper? Hermione, however, looked transfixed. She reached out carefully, her fingers brushing the parchment surface. The moment she touched it, golden letters appeared across the page, curling into existence as if written by an invisible hand. She sucked in a breath. It's in ancient runes. Harry frowned. Can you read it? She nodded, eyes scanning the text. Yes, but it's not just writing. It's magic. A chill ran down my spine. What does it say? Hermione took a deep breath and read aloud. Beyond the veil of time, where echoes remain, a path unseen, a power unchained. The keeper's hands shall shape the way. If wisdom guides and shadows stay. The words sent a strange shiver through the air, as if the very stones of the chamber had acknowledged them. Beyond the veil of time? Ron repeated. What does that even mean? Hermione's brow furrowed in deep thought. It's a riddle, or maybe a prophecy. She bit her lip. The mention of a veil makes me think of something connected to time, or maybe something that exists outside of normal magic. Harry's face darkened. I knew immediately what he was thinking about the veil in the Department of Mysteries, the place where Sirius had disappeared. This is something bigger than we thought, he murmured. I reached out, running my fingers lightly over the parchment. The golden letters pulsed at my touch, sending a soft warmth through my skin. It wasn't just a riddle. It felt like something more, a key in its own way, waiting to be used. Hermione's eyes flickered with realization. The keeper's hands, she whispered. Harry glanced up at her. What about it? She looked between us, her voice low but urgent. It says the keeper's hands will shape the way. If this parchment is connected to the key, then maybe whoever had the key is meant to do something. Ron frowned. You mean Harry? Hermione hesitated. Not just Harry. She looked at me. You held the key too. I felt my breath hitch. Me? The key only responded to people it trusted, she explained. It repelled Umbridge. It reacted to Harry, but you had it first. Maybe that means you're connected to whatever this parchment is leading us toward. I didn't know what to say. The idea that I was somehow important in all of this felt surreal. This had all started with a simple golden key, something I had found without understanding its purpose. But now, standing in this chamber with the unlocked chest and the glowing parchment, I felt the weight of something much larger pressing down on me. Harry exhaled. Then we have to figure out what this means before Umbridge catches on. Ron groaned. Speaking of Umbridge, she's going to notice we're missing soon. That snapped us all back to reality. We had been gone from the castle for who knew how long. If Umbridge had already reported us to Dumbledore, or worse, decided to investigate herself, we might not have much time before she came looking. I nodded. We need to get back. Harry carefully lifted the parchment from the chest. The golden text shimmered again, but the words remained etched into the page as if waiting for us to solve their mystery. Then came the next problem. The door, Hermione whispered. The key's gone. How do we? Before she could finish, the ground trembled beneath us. The runes on the walls glowed brighter, and a sudden rush of air swirled around the chamber. Then, just as suddenly as it had closed, the great wooden door reappeared. It stood there, solid and waiting, as if sensing our need to return. Well, that's convenient, Ron muttered. Harry wasted no time. He stepped forward and placed his hand on the door. With a soft, echoing click, it swung open, revealing the dimly lit corridor of Hogwarts beyond. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The sight of the familiar stone walls was almost surreal after what we had just experienced. Let's go, Harry said. One by one, we stepped through the doorway. The moment the last of us crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind us with a final sound, one that sent a shiver down my spine. When I turned back, the door was gone. The stone wall was blank, as if it had never existed in the first place. Ron ran a hand through his hair. Well, that's unnerving. We don't have time to think about it now, Hermione said quickly. We have to get back to Gryffindor Tower before someone finds us. Heart still racing, I nodded. We had entered that hidden chamber as 4 students chasing a mystery. Now, we were leading with something far more dangerous, a a secret that Hogwarts itself seemed determined to hide. And somewhere, deep in the castle, Umbridge was watching. We moved quickly, keeping to the shadows as we made our way back to Gryffindor Tower. The castle was eerily quiet, the usual distant hum of students and shifting staircases absent in the late-night stillness. Our footsteps echoed against the stone floors, each sound magnified in the silence, making us painfully aware just how exposed we were. Harry led the way, parchment clutched tightly in his grip. Hermione was right beside him, eyes darting between the corridors, as if expecting a patrol to round the corner any moment. Ron and I trailed behind, trying not to breathe too loudly. We turned a corner and froze. A flickering light shone from the far end of the hallway, a telltale glow of a lantern. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, tapped against the floor, growing louder. Someone was coming. Harry reacted first. He grabbed my arm and pulled me backward, pressing himself against the wall. Ron and Hermione did the same, slipping into the shadows. We held our breath as the footsteps drew closer. Then, the sickly sweet voice sent a shudder down my spine. Out of bed, are we? Umbridge. The four of us tensed. Through the dim glow of the lantern, I caught a glimpse of her squat figure, wrapped in that horrid pink cardigan, her beady eyes scanning the corridor. Her expression was smug, too smug, like she already knew someone was out tonight and was simply waiting to catch them. My heart pounded against my ribs. If she caught us now, she would have every excuse to interrogate us. We were already on her watch list. This would only confirm her suspicions. For a moment, it seemed like she would pass by. But then, sniff, sniff. She inhaled deeply, nose twitching like a hunting dog. I know you're here, she cooed. You can't hide forever. I clenched my fists, willing myself to stay perfectly still. Hermione's fingers dug into my arm, as if silently telling me not to move. Then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, she turned and walked away. We waited, barely daring to breathe, until her footsteps faded into the distance. Ron exhaled loudly. That was too close. Harry didn't reply. He was already moving, motioning for us to follow. We didn't need to be told twice. We reached the portrait of the fat lady without further incident. The moment we scrambled through the entrance to Gryffindor Tower, I let out a breath of relief. The common room was empty, the dying embers of the fireplace casting a warm glow over the furniture. For a long moment, we just stood there, catching our breath. Then, Hermione spun around. That was too convenient, she whispered. I frowned. What do you mean? She folded her arms. She knew someone was out tonight. She was waiting. Harry sat down on one of the worn couches, running a hand through his messy hair. She's been suspicious of us for weeks, he muttered. Maybe she thought we'd try something. Ron flopped onto an armchair. Or maybe she's been following us. That sent a chill down my spine. Hermione chewed her lip. She might have informants. There are plenty of students who wouldn't think twice about reporting us to her for extra credit. Malfoy, Ron muttered bitterly. Harry sighed. Either way, we don't have much time before she figures out what we're up to. We need to solve this riddle. I hesitated. But what if solving it leads us somewhere worse? Silence. We all knew what that test had felt like. The Shadow Guardian had forced us to confront something personal, something that reached deep into our fears and desires. Whatever lay ahead wouldn't be easier. But Harry's expression hardened. We've come this far. We can't stop now. He unrolled the parchment and read the riddle again. Beyond the veil of time, where echoes remain, a path unseen, a power unchained, the keeper's hands shall shape the way. If wisdom guides and shadows stay. Hermione sat beside him, brow furrowed. The veil of time, that could mean something related to the Department of Mysteries. But Hogwarts has its own history with time magic, too. I blinked. Like the time turners? Her eyes widened slightly. Yes, though they were all supposedly destroyed. Ron groaned. Well, that's just fantastic. What are we supposed to do? Build one? Hermione ignored him, her focus sharp. The phrase where echoes remain, that makes me think of memories. Harry looked up. Like a pensive? Hermione's expression turned thoughtful. Maybe. But we need to find one connected to whatever this key was guarding. I swallowed. So where do we start? Hermione hesitated, then her eyes flickered with realization. The room of requirement. Harry straightened. Of course. Ron raised an eyebrow. Wait, what? Hermione stood. The room of requirement becomes whatever we need it to be, right? What if it can show us a memory tied to this parchment? Something hidden in Hogwarts' past? My pulse quickened. It made sense. The room had given Dumbledore's army exactly what it needed before. Maybe it could do the same now. Ron groaned but pushed himself up. Fine, but if that room decides we require another terrifying test, I'm blaming you. We left the common room, moving swiftly but cautiously through the castle. My nerves were on edge, half expecting Umbridge to step out of the shadows at any moment. But we reached the 7th floor undisturbed. Standing before the familiar stretch of blank wall, Hermione took a deep breath. Think about what we need, she murmured. We closed our eyes, focusing. Show us the truth about the key. Show us what was hidden. Show us the past. Then, as if answering our unspoken plea, the door appeared. Harry was the first to step forward. He pushed the door open, revealing the room's newest form. And what we saw inside made my breath catch. The chamber was nothing like the cluttered version we had used for Dumbledore's army. It was a grand, circular room with walls made entirely of mirrors. No, not mirrors. Reflections. The glass shimmered like water, swirling with memories. Hermione gasped. It worked. Harry stepped inside, cautious. His reflection rippled strangely in the nearest panel, shifting, changing. And suddenly, it was no longer his reflection at all. It was Dumbledore. But not as we had known him. This was a much younger Dumbledore, his auburn hair untamed, his blue eyes sharp with intelligence. He was standing in a different version of Hogwarts, speaking to someone just out of sight. The memory played before us, the voices echoing softly. Time is not so easily unraveled, young Dumbledore was saying. There are forces even I do not fully understand. A second voice responded. And yet, you still intend to hide it here? Dumbledore nodded gravely. Hogwarts will keep it safe. No one will find it. The reflection blurred. Then, before we could process it, another figure appeared in the mirrors. Not a memory. Umbridge, standing just outside the room of requirement, watching us. For a long, frozen second, none of us moved. In the shifting mirrors of the room of requirement, Umbridge's reflection stood just outside the door, her squat figure silhouetted by the dim glow of her lantern. Her beady eyes gleamed with triumph, her toad-like mouth curling into a smug little smirk. She knew. The realization hit me like a hex to the chest. Somehow, whether by following us, tracking the magic, or sheer luck, she had found us. And now, she was waiting for us to come out, trapped like mice in a cage. "We have to go," I whispered, heart hammering. Harry had already started moving. With a sharp flick of his wand, he waved his hand over the parchment. "Evanesco." The paper vanished instantly, hidden within his robes. "What do we do?" Ron asked, voice low but urgent. "There's no other way out." Hermione's eyes darted around the room. "Unless..." But she never got to finish. Because at that moment, the door swung open. And there she was. Dolores Umbridge. The sight of her standing in the doorway, triumphant and menacing in her own sickly sweet way, sent a jolt of panic through me. She raised her wand, her expression full of mock delight. My, she cooed, stepping inside. "You lot have been very, very naughty." Harry moved instinctively, stepping in front of us. "We're just..." "Oh, don't even try, Mr. Potter," she interrupted, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "Do you think I don't know what you've been up to? Skulking around the castle, sneaking off into secret chambers, tampering with dangerous magic?" Her expression darkened. "You are all in very serious trouble." My stomach twisted. This was bad. She had us cornered. She knew something was going on, even if she didn't understand exactly what we had found. And with her power over Hogwarts growing stronger, she could do anything to keep us from escaping. Hermione took a cautious step forward. "Professor Umbridge, we were only..." But Umbridge wasn't interested in listening. Her fingers twitched around her wand. "Hand it over," she ordered. Harry narrowed his eyes. "Hand what over?" "The parchment," she said, voice sharper now. "I know you found something." "A spell? A secret passage? Some dangerous little relic hidden away by Dumbledore?" Her nostrils flared. "You will give it to me. Now." Silence. None of us moved. For a moment, the air in the room was heavy with tension, an invisible battle being fought in our locked gazes. Then, Harry ran. It was pure instinct, a split-second decision. He bolted for the door, pushing past Umbridge before she could react. "Gio!" he shouted, and suddenly, we were all moving. Ron shoved past her next, nearly knocking the lantern from her hand. Hermione grabbed my wrist and pulled, the two of us rushing after them as Umbridge let out a furious shriek. "Stop them," she bellowed, her voice echoing down the hallway. We sprinted through the castle, our footsteps pounding against the stone floors. My chest was burning, my legs moving on pure adrenaline. Somewhere behind us, Umbridge's heavy footfalls followed, along with the sharp bang of spellfire. "Stupefy!" A red jet of light whizzed past my shoulder, barely missing me. My stomach lurched. She was actually firing at us. She's insane. Ron gasped as we tore down another corridor. Tell me something I don't know. I shot back. Harry skidded around a corner. The staircase, hurry! The moving staircases were ahead, shifting and twisting as they always did. But we didn't stop. We took the steps two at a time, racing toward the top. Another spell crashed into the railing, sending a burst of splinters into the air. Expelliarmus! Harry shouted, whirling around. The spell hit Umbridge's wand dead on. Her grip loosened for just a moment, the wand flying from her grasp. It was all the time we needed. We reached the 7th floor, panting and disoriented. Hide! Hermione gasped, eyes darting wildly. Then, I saw it. The tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy. I knew what that meant. The room of requirement. I gasped. Harry caught on immediately. He turned, pacing 3 times in front of the wall, desperation in his voice as he muttered, "We need a place to hide. We need a place to hide." The door appeared. Without hesitation, we dove inside, and the moment the last of us crossed the threshold, the door vanished into stone. Silence. The 4 of us stood there, panting, our hearts racing. We had escaped. For now. I looked around. The room had transformed into a small, dimly lit chamber filled with bookshelves and old furniture, a perfect hiding place. Dust hung in the air, but I didn't care. Ron flopped onto an old couch. That was mental. Hermione collapsed into a chair, clutching her side. She was going to curse us. Harry was still standing, staring at the door as if expecting it to burst open at any moment. But Umbridge wouldn't find us here. The room of requirement had saved us once again. Slowly, reality settled in. We weren't just in trouble now. We were wanted. Umbridge had seen us searching for something. She had seen the magic involved, the danger, the secrecy. She wasn't going to stop now. She would double down, hunting us with everything she had. Harry pulled a parchment from his robes, unfolding it carefully. The golden letters still shimmered on the page. "This isn't over," he murmured. I swallowed hard. "What do we do now?" Hermione's voice was quiet but certain. "We finish what we started." Silence fell. Despite everything, the chase, the fear, the danger, none of us hesitated. Because we knew the truth now. This was bigger than us. Bigger than Umbridge. Bigger than Hogwarts itself. And whatever secrets the parchment held, whatever power had been hidden away long ago, we were going to find it. No matter what. No matter who tried to stop us. And so, the mystery lingers, like a soft echo in the halls of Hogwarts, waiting to be unraveled. The journey is far from over, but for now, the castle sleeps, wrapped in the quiet hum of ancient magic. Let the warmth of the story settle in your mind, like a gentle spell easing you into rest. The flickering torchlight fades, the footsteps grow distant, and the whispers of the past drift into silence. Close your eyes. Breathe in the stillness. The adventure will wait for another night. But for now, let yourself drift, safe in the magic of dreams.